Are you? Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Profiles. I'm Damien, and this is Fabrice, and we're friends and human design geeks and gene keys geeks and consciousness and personal development geeks, and we're just having a lot of fun investigating and exploring different profiles as a teaching point of human design and as our own personal exploration and research into human design. It's fascinating to explore the world of the profile and see how well does that fit, how well does that make sense when we look at a profile and we look at a person, and can we see the characteristics of the person in that profile represented? And that's really the experiment that I'm in, and I'm super fascinated by it. It's like an experiment. First, the experiment is applying that to myself, and then the second part of the experiment is applying that externally and seeing, can I actually start to see who people are through their profile, not to box them or to type them, but more to actually understand what are the particular unique struggles that people deal with, and what are their particular gifts and talents and potentials that they have to really actualize themselves in life. That's what all of this is about. It's not about constriction and boxing and this is who you are and this is how you should be. It's more like, what challenges do we have and who could we potentially be? And this episode is going to be a fun one because we are going to look at some composite. We're going to look at a composite reading. And a composite reading is when we take two charts side by side and we look at the relationship between their designs, and we kind of investigate from that perspective. And one of the ways that composites can be used is in a work kind of organizational setting, and another one is in a romantic setting. And this is fascinating for those of us who want to understand how to optimize our romantic relationships, and what are the kind of partnerships that are going to really succeed, and where are the particular challenges that we might have, and what are the potentials. So we're going to stay with hot topics for the moment, and we are going to be looking at Will and Jada Pinkett Smith and diving into their profile. Got anything to add before we dive in, Fabrice?
Well, we chose this specific couple, and we're still doing the series of celebrity design, celebrity profiles, because we all know them, and so we can all relate and really understand the profiles. Of course, they've been in the news recently. It's just they have a really interesting, both of them, and coming together is just a very interesting relationship dynamic. And so we were trying to understand it a bit deeper, and everybody knows them. And also, we're thinking of running an upcoming dating by design workshop and looking into relationships. So hopefully also this is giving you an idea of what's possible when you learn about your own chart, your partner's chart, and when you put the two of them together.
Great. I love that. And yeah, just the last little point, like we've done a little bit of investigation into their relationship, because quite a lot of aspects of the relationship between Will and Jada is public. They have their red table talks. There's a lot of kind of stories about them, and you can see them if you want to get a bit more of a sense of the relationship and what that seems to look like. You can look up some YouTube videos of the red table talks, and there's some edited versions, and you can really see the challenges that we're going to try and investigate in these profiles that are quite evident there. We can see what it looks like when they're relating, and we can actually see in the profile unique challenges that are coming up. So that's the perspective that we're going to be taking in this reading.
Yeah. So let's do it.
Let's dive in. Cool.
So that's their chart, and before we go into the composite, and this is, also for you to learn how to do a relationship reading. You first want to start with the two individuals. Yeah, we don't touch the composite until the end, because first we want to understand who Will is and who Jada is. Yeah, and then we want to see, what is it like for this profile to interact with the other profile, and we can see the challenges, and then finally we look into the actual composite and how they connect as one. And the first, so Will Smith is an emotional generator, and Jada is a splenic projector. This is as far apart in terms of profiles as you can imagine. They are two completely different animals. Jada has two centers. It's an awareness center connected through one channel to the throat. She's just here to express her intuitive awareness. It can have a really cold feeling to it. She doesn't have any energy, any motor centers defined, and none of it connected to the throat, especially. So there's no energy being expressed there. Whereas him, he's an emotional generator with a defined ego as well. And we're going to come back to those points, but that's the first thing to really, notice, is that they're completely different people, and for him, she might feel quite cold, in the way that she is. And for her, he might be a bit too much at times, too intense,
We feel quite
lacking,
noisy.
yeah, noisy, and probably for her
A
actually
lot of
lacking
energy.
awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of energy, and lacking this awareness that she has, so that's pretty much the overall theme that we see here. And before we come back to those different centers, I think the really interesting thing to see is between their profiles. So we have the 5-1 and the 3-5. And you'll notice that both of them share a fifth line. Yeah. So she has the 5, he has the 5. But being a 5-1 and being a 3-5, that fifth line is going to be expressed very differently. Yeah. So you might already know, but maybe not. The position of the lines has an importance. The first line that you have, so in his case is the 5th, in her case is the 3. This is your personality. This is what, who you think you are and what people see you as. And in his case, he's the biggest star. He gets the most recognition. He gets the most projections on him as well, because he has a fifth line personality.
And a lot of the
And that's
time
what
they're positive projections, right? Fifth lines, they get projections, yet generally they're actually quite positive projections until they start letting people down. And then if they start letting a lot of people down, they get negative projections. But usually fifth lines will actually get a lot of positive projections. And you can see that with Will. Like, it's very easy to project a whole bunch of positive qualities onto Will. It's very easy to look at him and make up I noticed myself, I look at him and I'll make up a story in my head of how funny he is and how hardworking he is and how talented he is. And I've got a story very, very quickly of who he is, and it's a positive one.
Yeah. And, so in his case, his personality is like that, but who he really is and what comes out in the relationship is the second line of the profile, which in his case is a 1. Yeah. He's a first line in his relationship. She is a fifth line in her relationship. And so the real leader, the real boss, the one actually getting a lot of the projections and expectations in their relationship is her. So inside of their relationship, not the way the world sees them, but inside the relationship itself, he's probably looking up to her. He's probably expecting her to be somewhat of a savior, to maybe have all the right solutions to everything. Probably a lot of very, very high expectations and some disappointments along the way. And she's probably the boss. The shadow of the fifth line in the relationship is to be a bit of a, bossy dictator inside of your relationships, to only have your way and no other way around. That can be a pretty tough dynamic, the 5 versus the 1, because the 1 in the relationship, the shadow and the difficulty of the first line, especially when it's unconscious, is the insecurity that it can have. And also, and you can talk about that because you're 4-1, this need for security and this need for stability and being ready to compromise and being ready to take on a lot, to even maybe be a bit bullied in the relationship for the sake of stability, and the sake of the, stability of the relationship, sake of the stability of the family, which for, him is extra important. He has, almost the 2 channels that relate to, the core family and the children and so on. So very, very extra important for him. And his own stability in life, his own feeling of security. And so, yeah, it's pretty clear dynamic between the 2 of them that, most likely she's the boss and most likely she's the one making a lot of the decisions inside of their relationship. I'm sure you have things to add when it comes to the first line.
Yeah, well, definitely, like as you said, the first line feels like there's a very strong need for stability, for it to be anchored, to be grounded, to like know the relationship's going to be okay. Like that's a very strong need. And when that gets destabilized, I know in my own experience, things get really hard. Like it gets really tough. Life gets tough when the relationship isn't stable. And you know, something that's we know about the story between Will and Jada is there's been periods of time where they've had to separate from, they've had time apart in their relationship, or they've opened it up and Jada has pursued people outside of the relationship. And I know as the line one, that could be very destabilizing, very, very uncomfortable to deal with, because there's no sense of like, I don't know what's happening anymore. I'm insecure. It's the insecurity, right? Yeah.
And can you talk a bit about the anchor piece? Because there's also this gift of the first line and the actual desire behind it.
Yeah, like I feel like when I'm in the healthy expression of this first line in relationship, it's like I can tether us to the ground. I am the anchor, I am the solid point, and there's like a resting point in that. And that feels really good when I'm in it. It's like, and the first line also has this kind of introspective quality to it. It feels like I feel when I feel anchored and solid, I like kind of turning inwards and being in that investigation. So there's often a lot of it's a lot of awareness of the internalness of the relationship that the line one can have and what it needs to be stable or grounded or anchored. And that's what kind of feels like for me. And then I imagine the fifth line in the relationship in this second part, in the healthy expression, is really it leads the relationship. It guides the relationship. The fifth line is going to go, this is where we're heading as a relationship, and this is how we're going to achieve it. And they could, in a healthy expression, work really well together. But in that unhealthy expression, the first line is going to feel insecure and unstable and ungrounded. And the fifth line is going to be bossy and like kind of an intolerance, like, or like a, like you're just not doing it right. Like I could see that. I could see that fifth line could have a like, you're not doing it right vibe to it. Especially with the particular profile that Jada has. The Splenic Projector is probably going to have, with this one channel, it's going to have a lot of like, I know what's right. Like I look at this channel and there's like, I know the truth. I know what is right and what is wrong. And I know it because I feel it. Like I feel it right now. So that's what it is. There's like no real wiggle room.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, that her being a splenic projector and him being on this crazy emotional and ego trip in this life. Like, she's naturally, and her being the five in the relationship and him being the one, in the relationship, she's probably looking at him like as if he's so lost and he needs guidance, and she's the one who's going to guide them. Like in general, the dynamic between the projector and the generator is the projector will have the tendency to want to guide the generator, but it's triple true because of their other centers, because of her being fully open, accepting her spleen connecting to the throat, and him being, very defined in his energy centers, and especially, his emotional wave. And we've seen recently what his emotional wave can do. So yeah, it's a bit this dynamic of he's this super energetic, super emotional, super like, again, this ego trip as well, where we're talking about the intensity and excitement and the will of this 2551, this channel here that he has, and it's pushing him through the relationship. It's making him take the leap, and okay, I'm going to do the work, and I'm never going to give up, and taking the initiative to stick to the higher ideals of love of the 25. So he's really able to push through, but at the same time, I can see how for her it's just so intense, just so intense all the time. It's either going to be about his emotional trip or about his ego trip, which don't have to be negative per se. But for her, being so open everywhere and being so cold in her own profile, it's just like, it's like you're, kind of like a dog that's just too much. And over the years, and it looks like, she's trained him in certain ways. There is this feeling that, like, even in those red table talks, when they're having conversations, he's been trained to talk in a certain way. She's been leading the way in terms of, okay, this is the work that we're going to be doing on ourselves. This is who we are now. We're kind of spiritual. We're kind of into psychology. We're kind of into all those conscious talks, and you're going to get on board and you don't have a choice. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I can do it. I can do it. And he's trying and he's doing it. But meanwhile, you can, like, on one hand, his ego is making him do it, but his solar plexus is just in so much disagreement with all of it. You can see all his emotions coming out, all the time. And this recent slap in the Oscars ceremony, it was not about the joke. It was about the state of the relationship, and it was just easier for him to go and slap Chris Rock than to slap his own wife or to slap himself.
Yeah, and it's again this kind of grand gesture thing that's like, look at me, look how hard I'm trying, look how good I'm trying to be. I'm really trying. Another point that I wanted to just go back to, we moved into the channel a little bit, but I also wanted to go back to, like, he's got 3 motor centers. There's the sacral, the solar plexus, and the ego. And as non-sacral beings, you and I know what it's like to be around a sacral being. It's noisy. If you're a non-sacral being, if you're a projector or a manifestor, I'm a manifestor, Fabrice is a projector. When you're around someone who has a sacral, and I'm sure it's the same for you, it definitely is for me, it's like there's a hum. It's like the air conditioner's on. There's a hum in the room and it never stops. It's just like something that I have to get used to. My partner is a generator, as is yours. And she hums all the time. She hums through the night. She hums in the morning. She hums during the day. It never turns off. And, I have a defined ego. I have an undefined solar plexus, and I know what it's like to be around people with defined solar plexus. It's like a ride. It's a roller coaster. I lived in a house with a very dear friend who has a defined solar plexus, and I wouldn't know where she was going to be at any given day. I'll be making breakfast in the morning and she'd come downstairs, she'd come into the kitchen, and it'd be like being whacked by an emotion. It'd be like, oh, damn, like if she's in a bad mood, it like hits me like a brick, it's like really strong, right? So I know that. And you and I both have defined egos, so we don't have that experience, but I know my partner doesn't. And the defined ego is really pushy. It's kind of like this pushy energy. And it's like push on somebody. So, what really stands out for me, it's like these 3 motor centers to Jada are probably just noise all the time. It's probably this
intense,
constant kind of friction or grinding pressure on her experience that never stops. It's like, God, can you just turn it off for a minute? Like, it's driving me nuts. The Splenic Projector is a very quiet profile. I imagine when she's on her own, there's probably a lot of quietness in her life. When she spends time alone, it's probably very quiet without much happening at all. And then I can imagine Will bounding home. He's coming home and he bounds into, honey, I'm home. And it's just like suddenly the whole house is vibrating with noise, that Will's bringing.
Yeah, that's again the big difference between them. And for her, it must feel just so intense. And the way that she's going to deal with that intensity, well, we talked about the 5th line, and she might try to become more and more bossy to try and have a hold of him, to try and tame this beast. But also she has the 3rd line, and the 3rd line repeats in important places. She has the 3rd line personality, so it's going to make her want to escape. It's going to make her want to get out of there and be with other people, or just escape and be on her own. But also her attraction sphere, right here, she has the 3rd line, and she has the 3.3. That's interesting. There's that chaos. Yeah, there is the 3 is this constant need for the new. It's a sacral gate, so it is one of the sexual gates, and it's in the sphere of her sexuality. And the 3rd line on top of it is promiscuity versus playfulness. So if there's one line in the sexuality of someone that's going to be most likely to seek other partners, to seek someone else for a romantic or sexual relationship, it's going to be this 3rd line. But the 3.3 even more. It's like for that type of her being a 3.5, and on top of it having this 3.3, needing all the time innovation in her sexuality, needing playfulness, needing, to seek something else and something different, the idea of a monogamous marriage is probably quite difficult. And on top of it being a splenic projector, and in general, the projector also likes to sample different things in their sexuality to not be too conditioned by just one person. So everything in there, is under pressure to go and seek something else or someone else.
So just for those people who might have got a little bit lost there for a moment, what Fabrice is talking about, the 3.3 is there where the mouse is on the unconscious moon, and this is the attractosphere and gene keys. So we're bringing the gene key overlay on top of the human design, and these two, the gene keys really comes out of the human design. As you'll see when we look at this, we're looking, all the gene key numbers are in here in their profile. The unconscious moon relates to the attractosphere, which is the second sphere, and the Venus sequence, which is a relational sequence, or the sequence of our kind of relational wounds and shadows and gifts and potentials. And so, yeah, this line 3 that he talked about has the shadow of promiscuity, and the gene key number 3 there, the 3.3, is the shadow of chaos, or the need for innovation as well. So we've got this like chaos and promiscuity. There's almost like like in that one, there'd be like a need to disrupt things, right? And so from that, disrupt things in a promiscuous way. And we know that has happened in their relationship. Like, this is something that's definitely happened.
And you see it in the conversation that they're having in one of those red table talks, when she's talking about this entanglement. So this relationship that she had started with this other guy. And you can see that in Will's mind, and it's just like, it's still something that's unacceptable. It was a mistake. It was like, okay, I kind of forgive you, but it's not okay. And for her, there's just no regret, no remorse. It's like, I needed this. I really needed it, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for him. There is another talk when she says like, he healed me, which for Will is just like excruciating to hear. It's just the most painful thing ever. Probably also as a 5-1, it's extremely painful, because he's putting on his own shoulder the need to fix everyone around him, and not being able to fix his own woman, and another man fixing his own woman, or a relationship with another man helping her, is just probably the most difficult thing to hear for him. But you can see that for her, it's like, I needed it, and that's me, and I don't feel sorry for it, and so that's because that's her profile.
Yep. And then on the other side, you're going to talk about so over here in the unconscious mood, in the attractosphere for Will, we have 15.4, the line 4. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I really want to talk about the line 4 here, because there's another clip that you can find about the red table talk where Will is explaining, and again, you can see that it's painful for him to explain it. Like, he did the work, and he looked like he was a bit trained to tell the story like this, because this is her conclusion from it. And he's like, okay, that's going to be the story. But basically, it was her 40th birthday. She was depressed. She was not well. She was unhappy with her life. I'm guessing unhappy with the relationship. And him being a 5-1, and having the pressure, feeling the pressure to fix her, to make her feel better.
All of this energy.
All of this energy, a defined ego, taking the initiative for a gesture of love. Because again, if we take the 51 and the 25, we have the initiative in the 51, and then we have the love of the 25. So, taking the initiative to show a grand gesture of love. And on top of that, being a 4th line in his attraction sphere, it's all about romance, and romance can also like those grand gestures, and it can be extremely painful when you get rejected there. And that's, what happened basically is that Jada so apparently he organized the most epic birthday ever, with all the stars and with all the happenings that you can imagine. And he thought it was going to be amazing. And she told him, like, you're not doing it for me. You're doing it for your own ego. You're just doing it for yourself. It's just because you want to look a certain way. And while there's some truth to that, I can also see how it's just so dismissive of the genuine love behind it as well. It's never black and white. Of course, there's always going to be selfish motives, but if it's that's the only story and the only conclusions that come out of there, it's really sad. Like, it's the ultimate rejection. It's probably felt like a real heartbreak for him. And yeah, you can see how they're just so it's just so different, like extremely different in a lot of places. And I mean, we can get to this in a bit, but there's not much connection that's beneficial for their romantic connection, for their sexual connection, for if anything, they're probably good at working together and building something together, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add to that line 4. Like, I don't have the line 4 in my attractor, but I have a lot of it in my chart. And that line 4 has this strong desire to serve. It doesn't matter where it is in the chart. The lines have a similar tone no matter which sphere they sit in, even though it's adjusted for that specific sphere. But there's definitely that line 4 strong desire to serve. So even though, okay, there was a sense of his own ego, he has a defined ego, there is going to be a need for him to do things from that thing. There is that romance, there is that service for the relationship, the service for that kind of thing, and the shadow of rejection, or the wound of rejection there. And you can see in that video when, like, he's actually just cut in. This is 10 years ago or whatever, and he's still hurt about that experience. There's, like, you can see it on his face. He's not happy about it.
Yeah, it's painful.
Should we move into the channels, their connection channels?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just talking about. So they have two electromagnetic channels, also called attraction channels. We have the 1858 and the 5734. The 1858 is called a channel of judgment. So on one hand, we have the 58, which as a shadow is dissatisfaction. As a gift, though, it's vitality, which can be a very beautiful gift. And this city of bliss sounds lovely, but this shadow of dissatisfaction can be pretty strong. And so the 58 is Will's gate, and she has the 18. Well. Yeah, and so this one is really like a energetical root dissatisfaction. Yes, it's not an awareness process. It's definitely not a mental process. You're not thinking about it. It's just a state of something doesn't feel quite right. The 18 is the splenic awareness of judgment. Yeah, it's the ability to say what doesn't work, to see what needs to be fixed, what needs to be changed. It can be very critical, very judgmental, of course. I have the 18 as my pearl, so I'm very familiar with this energy. It has the gift of integrity. Yeah, we both have it, and you have the full channel. And it can, it's a beautiful gift of integrity and seeking perfection. But when you look at the shadows of judgment and dissatisfaction, and especially when you understand that those two people come together to form this channel, well, those are energies that are going to be there all the time, in the relationship itself. It's going to feel like never enough. It's just never quite enough, never good enough. And I know because I have the 18, my partner has the full channel. And we both have a lot of that in our lives, and we bring some of it in the relationship for sure. And it's just this energy there that's difficult. Like, if you're not forming anything else that's like strongly bringing you together in love or in sexuality or in romance, or it's difficult. It's difficult because you need something else to balance it out, and this is probably the dominant channel that's there. Do you want to say something about it before I move on to the other one?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like if they're operating from the shadow, right, they're feeding each other. So judgment is feeding dissatisfaction, and we see that in that video that we're talking about, the gesture that Will's trying to offer, and they're like, nah, you're doing it for my ego. That's the judgment, right? There's a judgment, and there's that dissatisfaction. And the dissatisfaction can also, like, especially in the purpose, I can imagine it being a kind of just like, oh, it's just not quite working right. It's not quite working right. And Will has the 59-6, which is like this desire, and also the other one, like to get it right. You can feel he's getting it right. And so the dissatisfaction, I can imagine, really rubs up against that. And then also probably when he's like, that dissatisfaction is going to feed the judgment as well. They're going to feed into each other. So if it's like, it's
Yeah.
not quite right, it creates more judgment of just like, you know, why are you trying so hard? Like I can imagine some of the talks they would have. You try too hard, Will. And he's like, you know, you're always kind of like a bit mean to me. Why are you being so mean to me? It's like, well, because you try too hard. You know, it's like I can almost hear that conversation happening between those two gates.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were watching this clip together, and it was like, it's pain. Just
It's
4 minutes of
painful.
it. It's like you feel, you're like, ah. There's a mix. It's like awkward. It's passive aggressive. You see that, especially like you see that she's just so tired of him on so many layers, and she's like, "Yep, I did it. I fucked someone else, and I have zero regrets around it." And she's almost like she's not holding back, let's say, and she doesn't have any remorse about it. And meanwhile, him just trying to hold his emotions so strongly, and it's just, yeah, it's difficult to watch. You feel it inside, and the other piece is the 3457, which I wouldn't have too much to say in terms of a romantic relationship around it. I would say it's a very nice, probably work dynamic. If someone has it as an individual, it's actually also, it's all about energy and the intuition of how to use that energy, how to use your power. Could be nice as like a physical connection, but I wouldn't say sexual per se. But in relationship, the shadow of this channel is violence, and so there could also be a tendency to do violence to each other. And I don't mean necessarily physically, although maybe, but I don't think that's the case. But violence on many levels, and it. I don't see, like, if I would see this in I don't know, friends having this, or even in my own relationship, I wouldn't think of it as like, oh, this is such a great one to have in a relationship.
And you know what you said about the violence, it's like those clips that you watch on the red table between them, they seem violent to me. They're not
Yeah.
violent in the way that we
Yeah.
think of it. There's no physical, it's not even emotional abuse, but there's like you watch and it's like there's like energetic stabs at each other
Yeah.
constantly. And I watch
Yeah.
these clips and I'm like, they've been carrying this for years. Like there is
Yeah.
resentment. They laugh, there's a laugh, but it's almost like the laughter of like, oh God, that really hurts on the inside. I'm just going to
There's a
laugh
lot of
over the top of it.
aggression,
There's a lot
a
of
lot of
aggression.
aggression.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also I really want to talk about the compromise channels seem really interesting to me here as
Yeah,
well.
go for it. You had good insights.
Yeah. So the dominant and the only channel by Jada is the 4816, which is a channel of talent. And so people who have this channel tend to be naturally talented. They can naturally do things without a huge amount of effort. They don't have to extend a massive amount of effort to learn new skills or to master things or to just like get things done. They can do it without a lot of effort. And as we look at Will, we can, like, Will is a hard worker. You can see that he's got 3 motor centers. He's got that 2551. He's got that ego. He's worked hard to get to where he is. And, he talks about that. I know he talks about that, right? Like his work ethic is solid. Whereas for Jada, it's like probably very easy for her to do things when she wants to. There's probably just this natural talent for her to get it right. So that's her channel. And then we have a compromise channel, which means that Will has one gate of this channel, and he's got the gate 48. And the shadow of the gate 48, or the gene key 48, is inadequacy, right? And so I can see, to me, I look at this channel and I go, she's got this natural talent, and it's probably natural talents for communication and for understanding psychology and for like different things that she probably brings into their relationship. And there'd be an overshadowing of Will and this kind of like withering inadequacy on the inside that is like compromised. And that's why these channels are called compromise channels. They don't necessarily always have to be compromised. I think there are ways they can be beneficial. But if one person has the full channel, another person only has a gate, it's like the person with just the gate is going to feel constricted around that gate. Like that gate doesn't have a chance to properly express itself. It's overshadowed by the other person. And so that really stands out for me, that inadequacy overshadowed by the natural talent of Jada. And I imagine it probably just shows up behind closed doors. It shows up inside of the relationship. It shows up quietly. Will probably carries that deeply inside. I have, gene key 48 in my purpose, and it's particularly painful. This gene key, when it's in its shadow expression, it really, really hurts. And
Yeah.
that's what I could see again in that conversation with Will. It's almost like he's like nodding, but inside there's this like crushed sense happening. At least that's what I make up watching.
Yeah, and it has come out in different interviews. A piece of it is this channel of judgment, but you also see his inadequacy. It seems that from the beginning he was not really sure of what to do with her. Always feeling that her exes or lovers or would be better than him, and it's not just not feeling good enough. It's not feeling able to deal with her, to do what is needed to be the right partner, to because that's what inadequacy is. It's not about being good enough or not. It's this it's like a black hole of not knowing what to do, and not knowing how to respond, and not and I mean, the city of the 48 is wisdom, and the gift is resourcefulness. So it can turn into an amazing gift. You can become very resourceful, but at
And I
the shadow
imagine that
level,
shows up in his acting, the resourcefulness in his acting, and his ability to take on different roles and really embody them. I reckon that's where it would show up a lot.
Yeah. So that's that one. And then you also had some insights about the 59.
59.6 is what Will has, and 59.6 is really about children. 59.6 is about mating. It's about making children and kind of physically creating family. And I imagine that there has been a strong drive in Will the entire time to have family, to have children. That's what people who have this channel might have, this kind of experience, at least at some point in their life. They tend to be having that desire and that impulse. But it's also a strong mating channel. It's an interesting side note. I notice when two people, if someone has the 59 and someone else has just the 6, they have the 2 gates and they create that channel together. More often than not, if they date, they end up having a baby really fast. It's like baby making channel. I've seen this a few times, where a baby will happen in the first year of being in relationship. So he has the full channel, so he has this orientation towards family and child rearing and child generation, right? And she just has the 6, and the 6 has the shadow of conflict. And I can imagine, again, it's the overshadowed in the other direction. And I can imagine feeling like Jada just feeling kind of annoyed with Will's family orientation or child orientation. There'd be like an annoyance of it. And that conflict, that abrasive conflict, which again is oriented around mating, probably has something to do with, again, same with the 3.3, why Jada felt the need to go somewhere else, to go outside of the relationship for some other experience.
Yeah, and through this, her own open sacral is very conditioned by his, and by this channel that he has, and so there's probably a lot of sexual pressure that she's under from this, and so also again probably the desire to go and experience something else, because maybe it feels too much at times. Cool. I think we covered pretty much everything, huh?
Yeah. Should we have some concluding remarks? Like, for me, one of the conclusions, as we were discussing this before, if a couple came to me with this composite chart and said, what do you think? Or I was looking at it from that perspective, I would look at this chart and go, like, good luck. Like, there's no, like, I don't believe there's anything that can't work out with effort. But this is not a composite that has the odds stacked in the favor of success, love, warmth, connection, erotic polarity. Like, it's not, the odds aren't in the favor. There's not a lot of really deep love and connection apparent in this composite set of charts, this set of relationships. So, I would look at it from that perspective. It's like, this is not, if a couple came to me and showed me this chart, I'd be like, yeah, it makes sense why you're struggling. Like, I can see it. It's challenging, and you'd have to work really hard to kind of deal with that? Like there's some really strong things you'd have to work at.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it's an amazing, opportunity for working on yourself and growth and, and higher ideals of love and all of that. But it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be a tough one, and you just have to be, like Damon was saying, everything is possible. If you're committed, if you're devoted to the relationship. But yeah, it's ouch.
Ouch. And so the point of this, and as Fabrice mentioned at the beginning, maybe we can stop sharing the screen now,
Sure.
is that we can look at human design and we can look at composites and we can understand like what is the potentials of a relationship before we even get into a relationship. Like what an interesting tool to have access to, and so for me, like I'm definitely about like, okay, at the romantic Disney level, we want to meet someone and fall in love and like be swept off our feet. But there's also a really strong pragmatic nature to relationship that I think gets neglected. And if you want to have a long relationship, like a multi-year relationship that builds a family and builds a life together, it's like there's a pragmatic approach that needs to be honored too. And that pragmatic approach needs to recognize that we have similar logistics around the way we want to live our life and the amount of kids that we want to have and like our standards and and if we stack those things in our favor, we're going to have a bigger chance at a long-term successful relationship versus just being swept up in lust. Oh my God, there's so much chemistry, and you get swept up in the chemistry of a connection. And then you realize a few years later or a few months or however long that there's actually not a great compatibility. So we can actually use human design to look at compatibility early on. And I know in my own dating life, I started doing this. I started looking at the chart of anyone I dated and I looked at the composites and I made some assessments. Does this composite bode well? Does it stack odds in my favor? And I actually ended up dating someone who's on the chart level looks really good. Our charts look really good from a relational perspective. I don't know if my chart could be, it's almost as well suited to someone as my chart could be. And our relationship is the best relationship I've had. We have our challenges. No relationship is going to be free of challenge. Yet there seems to be a lot of odds in our favor, and obviously we've also done similar amounts of work and we have similar personal interests and everything. But this is one feature that adds to our life, and we understand and we use that in our relationship as well. We talk about our channels and our Venus sequence and everything, and we use that to support the growth of our relationship. So we're going to be running a workshop soon enough to talk about, and if you watch this in the future and that workshop has been in past, we'll have a link below that will give access to the replay, which we'll have, it'll become a masterclass, a replay, and how to use these kind of tools in your dating life, how to date by a design perspective.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll continue also the celebrity charts series. Twice a month or so, we'll keep on getting together and record those. And so, let us know also in the comments who you want to see next. If there is someone that you really want to see, we already have a list, but happy to add more celebrities to that list.
Yeah, great. Pleasure as always, Fabrice. It's good fun.
Thank you. See you next one.
See you next one.